Today, you are going to be learning about the book of 1st and 2nd Maccabees. And for starters, we're going to look at the first book of Maccabees for today. And in this first book of Maccabees, it has 16 chapters. And out of those 16 chapters, I broke it out into these 4 titles or sections. You can break it out any other way you prefer, but this is just how I broke it out. An introduction onto what is going on, and then we're going to see a crisis, and then we're going to see some rebellion. And that is going to cover chapter 1 and chapter 2. The other chapters, they are number 2. The other topics, they outline number 2, Judah's Maccabees, military might, and Jonathan and Simon. We'll cover those in coming weeks. But for today, just as an introduction, I want us to get a little bit into the weeds of this storyline that is happening, of this introduction that is happening in chapter 1 and chapter 2. So this is what we're going to talk about a little bit more in detail. So let me begin with this column here on the 6 points. We're going to see 2 groups of people. First, we're going to see a group of people that we can call the heathens, non-Israelite or non-Isolele. And then on this side, number 7 through 12, we're going to see about another group of people, which is Israelites or Isolele. And all this is happening around 130 BC, before the Common Era, to 170 or 75 or 74 BC. So in here, I have mentioned or highlighted the chapter 1, verse 1 to 9, chapter 1, verse 10 to 15, and so on, to tell you where these episodes are happening. So let me just introduce this, and then we'll go into these verses, not look at all of them, but we will look at some of the ones that I picked out where I think we get some insight that can tell us more about who these 2 groups of people were. So first of all, Alexander, and we're going to learn about his successors in the first verse, in the first verse to the 9th verse. Then we're going to see his successors like Epiphanes, who encourages the Greek ways, not the way of the Most High, but the Greek ways among Isolele. Then we see Antiochus, who is also the same guy, Epiphanes, attacking Egypt. And after that, Antiochus goes ahead to plunder the temple in Jerusalem. Then we see the Syrians occupying Jerusalem because they're being supported by Antiochus. And Antiochus, again, we see him introducing paganism. He tries to replace the ways of Isolele, their rituals, their feasts. He wants to replace that with paganism. After that, we're going to look at the family of Matadia. I prefer to call him that way, Matadia, because that's how we pronounce that name in Africa. We don't pronounce it as Mattathias. No, it's Matadia. So we're going to be introduced to who Matadia is, and his sons and his parents and grandparents and so on and so forth. And then we're going to see an episode where Matadia is lamenting over what has happened in Judah and Jerusalem. And this is as a result of what Alexander and his successors are doing in Jerusalem. There's a very interesting episode here where Matadia sees one of Isolele about to offer a sacrifice, a pagan sacrifice. And Mattathias doesn't just stand by, he does something about it. Then we see Isolele being attacked, and several of them are killed on the Sabbath. They even flee to the mountains. After which, or during which, Mattathias urges Isolele to fight for their lives and their laws. Notice these events are happening before the Common Era. So I wonder if Isolele became, let me call it, soft and started turning their cheek when Isaiah came around. Is it that before that they would not turn their cheek, they would fight, and now they were supposed to be turning their cheek after Isaiah came on the scene between 1 and, or between 4 and 35 or so AD? Anyway, before his death, Mattathias recalls to his sons the acts of their fathers. He goes all the way back to Abraham. So now I'm going to walk you through some of these examples of these verses that I have mentioned here in both of these two scenarios. And before I go on, I am pulling something on the screen. Let me get a confirmation from any one of you whether you can see the first Maccabees on the screen.
Yep.
All right, thank you. So, Alexander and his successors. Chapter 1, verse 1. It came to pass that Alexander, the Macedonian, pay attention, Macedonian, that's a European. He was the son of Philip, who came out of the land of Kittim or Chittim. Pay attention. What exactly is that land? Kittim. And he struck Darius, king of the Persians and the Medes. This is the same Darius that we read about in, I believe, the book of Daniel in the Bible. It came to pass after he had struck him that he reigned in his stead in former time over Greece. Okay, so we are being introduced to Alexander. I'm not going to go through all the verses, but I'll go through the ones that I have highlighted. Verse 4, and he gathered together an exceeding strong army and ruled over countries and nations and principalities, and they became tributary to him. This guy is spreading his empire all over the place. And he reigned 12 years and he died. That's Alexander and his successors, you know? Now, let's go to the second point that I had here about Antiochus encouraging Greek ways among Isolele. So I'm going to talk about that here in verse 10 to 11. And there came forth out of them a sinful root. Actually, in verse 9 says, and they, after Alexander dies, and his servants bear rule, each one in his place. These are the successors. And they did put diadems, those are crowns, upon themselves after that he died. And so did their sons after them many years, and they multiplied evils on the earth. These are the successors of Alexander. And there came forth out of them a sinful root, Antiochus Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days there came forth out of Israel transgressors of the law, and persuaded many, saying, again, transgressors of the law, pay attention to that. And they persuaded many, saying, let's go and make a covenant with the Gentiles that are round about us. Round about us. What does that mean to you? Gentiles who are round about us, Isolele. For since we parted from them, many evils have befallen us. And certain people were forward herein. They were very forthright. They just came, without a care, and went to the king, and he gave them license to do after the ordinances of the Gentiles. And they built a place of exercise, they built a place of exercise in Jerusalem according to the laws of the Gentiles. I don't know if this was a gym or something, but anyway, see what they did also. And they made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the Gentiles and sold themselves to do evil. Okay, that is all this happening here in number 2 on the left. So let's go to number 3, where Antiochus attacks Egypt. And here I'm just going to read verse 17. He entered into Egypt with a great multitude, with chariots and with elephants. Where did he get elephants from? And with horsemen and with a great navy. So he was coming via the seas. Navy. Okay, let's talk about Antiochus plundering the temple in Jerusalem. And Antiochus, after he had struck Egypt, returned in the 143rd year, and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, and entered presumptuously into the sanctuary, and took the golden altar and the candlestick of the light, and all that pertained thereto. I can read on, you can read on the verses in between here. He just made a mess of the temple. He defiled it. The end of all this, and the land was moved for the inhabitants thereof, and all the house of Jacob was clothed with shame. Now let's see the Syrians occupying Jerusalem after Antiochus has made a mess of the temple and pretty much defiled it, desecrated it, removed everything from it. And after 2 full years, the king sent a chief collector of tribute to the cities of Judah, and he came to Jerusalem with a great multitude, and he spoke words of peace to them, in deceit or subtly. And they gave him credence, and he fell upon the city suddenly. They trusted him. They shouldn't have. So he deceived them, and then he struck them very sore, and destroyed much or a lot of people out of Israel. That is the Syrians occupying Jerusalem. Let's look at some more damage that they were doing here. Verse 38. And the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them. And Jerusalem, she became a habitation of strangers. This is before 70 AD, remember. This is before the Common Era. Jerusalem has become a habitation of strangers, and she became strange to those who were born in her, so they were in exile, and her children forsook her. Her sanctuary was laid waste like a wilderness. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into reproach, her honor into contempt. That's what was happening to Jerusalem. Now let's see Antiochus trying to introduce paganism. And King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and that each should forsake his own laws. Oh, let's become one religion, one people, one nation. Forget your laws as this tribe or that tribe or this people or that people. Let's just all agree to forget all those things. That's what he was telling them. And all the nations agreed according to the word of the king. And many of Israel consented to his worship and sacrificed to the idols and profaned the Sabbath. And the king sent letters by the hand of messengers to Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that they should follow laws strange to the land. I'm going to jump ahead here. So that they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. And on the 15th day of Kislev, in the 145th year, they built an abomination of desolation upon the altar. Sounds familiar. I've seen this elsewhere. It's not their first rodeo. And in the cities of Judah, on every side, they built idol altars. This is the introduction of this paganism. They're trying to replace the ways of our ancestors and the laws with their pagan ways. Look at what they did to the books of the law. They tore in pieces the books of the law, which they found. The books of the law. Wow. Seems like they know when they get rid of those books, they get rid of us. Anyway, and they set them on fire. They burnt them. And wherever was found with any book of the covenant, and if any consented to the law, the king's sentence was delivered. The king's sentence delivered him to death. So if you're caught with any book of the covenant from our forefathers, book of the law, Moses' law, whatever it is, you were killed. That's what it's basically saying. All right. So what else did they do? On the 5th and 20th day, 25th day, 25th day, don't know which other 25th day comes to mind when I repeat that, of the month, they sacrificed upon the idol altar of God. And the women that had circumcised their children, they killed them according to the king's commandment. And they hung their babies about their necks. This is what we call lynching here in the US. And destroyed their houses and those who had circumcised them. And many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves not to eat unclean things. So they were changing the dietary laws and telling them, oh, you can eat pork and you can eat all the other stuff that they were being told in their laws, in the Israelite laws, not to do. And they chose to die. Isolele, our ancestors chose to die instead of being defiled with the meats, and that they might not profane the holy covenant, and they died. And there came exceedingly great wrath upon Isolele. All right, let's look at the other side now. That was this side of Alexander and his successors. Now let's talk about this other side, the family of Mattathias, Mattathia. In those days rose up Mattathias, the son of John. His dad was called John, the son of Simeon. So his granddad was called Simeon. I'm repeating this because I want you to notice something that is common with our ancestors and how they name their children. So we have Mattathias is a son of John, and John is a son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Joarib from Jerusalem, and he lived at Modin. Matthias lives in Modin. He had 5 sons. John named his first son after his dad. Pretty common. My son is named after my dad. Simon, which is the same as Simeon. I couldn't help but wonder where this Simeon is related to the Simon Toko we know of today. But anyway, that's another discussion. John, Simon, Judas, who was called Maccabees, which is where we get this book Maccabees. Eliezer and Jonathan. Those are the 5 sons of Mattathias. And Mattathias saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem. And he said, he didn't just see it, but he said something about it. He said, woe is me, wherefore that I was born to see the destruction of my people. He's basically saying, man, why do I have to see this stuff? And the destruction of the holy city, and to dwell in it, when it was given into the hand of the enemy, the sanctuary into the hand of aliens. So we are foreigners. Her temple is become as a man that was glorious. Her vessels of glory are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in her streets, her young men with the sword of the enemy. What nation has not inherited her places and gotten possession of her spoils? Her adorning is all taken away. Instead of a free woman, she's become a bondwoman, a slave woman. And behold, our holy things and our beauty and our glory are laid waste. And the Gentiles, the heathen, the Kafirs, have profaned them. We know who's profaning them. Wherefore, or why should we live any longer? And Mattithiah and his sons tore their clothes and put on sackcloth and mourned exceedingly. They went into fasting. That's that introduction of the second part here, where Mattithiah is lamenting over Judah and Jerusalem. All this he is lamenting. Now let's see him preventing a pagan sacrifice. From verse 15. So the king's officers, these are the descendants of Alexander, that were enforcing the apostasy, came into the city, Modin, to sacrifice. And many of Israel came to them. And Mattithiah and his sons were gathered together. And the king's officers answered and spoke to Mattithiah, saying, "You're a ruler and an honorable and great man in this city, blah, 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 with your sons and kindred relatives. Now, therefore," they're telling him, "you, Mattithiah, come first and do the commandment of the king. And if you do those things, we will give you and your sons silver and gold and many gifts." They're paying him. They're trying to bribe them so that Mattithiah and his sons, who are leaders in their community, can do the wrong thing, and then the rest of Isolile can follow. Let's see what Mattithiah said. He said it with a loud voice, and I'm skipping in between here. But he said, "I and my sons and my relatives will walk in the covenant of our fathers." And he said it in a loud voice, right? It says here, with a loud voice. "Heaven forbid that we should forsake the law and the ordinances. We will not listen to the king's words to go aside from our worship on the right hand or on the left hand." When he had finished speaking these words, there came one of Isolile in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, which was at Modin, according to the king's commandment. And Mattithiah saw it, and his zeal was kindled, and his reins trembled, and he showed forth his wrath according to judgment. He ran, killed him upon the altar. Mattithiah killed a fellow Israelite because he couldn't stand it. So that's how he prevented a pagan sacrifice from happening on the altar. All right, let's see how Isolile get killed on the Sabbath. This is from verse 27 to around 38. So Mattithiah says, "Whoever is zealous for the law and maintains the covenant, come with me or after me." And he and his sons fled into the mountains and forsook all that they had in the city. They pretty much ran away into the mountains. Then many that sought after justice and judgment went down into the wilderness to dwell there, they and their sons and their wives and their cattle, because evils were multiplied upon them. And it was told the king's officers and the forces that were in Jerusalem, the city of David, that certain men who had broken the king's commandment were gone down into the secret places in the wilderness. So this basically telling the king, a lot of the Israelites have run, or Isolele have run into the forest, and they're hiding there. When I was reading this, it just reminded me of colonialism. This is what our grandparents did. They used to run into the wilderness to stay away from the colonialists who would come and capture them and enslave them and force them to labor. Anyway, and many pursued after them, and having overtaken them, they encamped against them. So the king's people pursued Isolele, and they set the battle in array against them on the Sabbath day. And they say to them, "This far, come forth and do according to the word of the king, and you shall live." Basically, they're telling them, surrender, come out and do what the king says, which is adopt pagan ways, and you will be left to live. And they said, the Israelites said, "We will not come forth, neither will we do the word of the king." to profane the Sabbath day. So they're refusing to do what they're being told. And this is what is going to happen to them as a result. I go down here. And they rose up against them in battle on the Sabbath. They solely rose up against the king's people, and they died. They solely died. They and their wives and their children and their cattle, to the number of 1,000 souls. 1,000 people died. I can tell you there's a lot of anger in me as I was reading this, and even now when I read it again. So that's why I'm sighing deeply. Anyway, let's see what happens next. Mattathias is going to urge Isolele to fight for their lives and their laws. And one said to another, if we all, here it says, and Mattathias and his friends knew it, and they mourned over them exceedingly. And one said to another, if we all do as our kindred have done, and fight not against the Gentiles for our lives and our ordinances, they will now quickly destroy us from off the earth. They're going to wipe us out. Will become an extinct people. And they took counsel on that day, saying, whoever shall come against us to battle on the Sabbath day, let us fight against him. And we shall in no way all die, as our kindred have died in their secret places in the wilderness. And Mattathias and his friends went round about and pulled down the altars, and they circumcised by force the children that were uncircumcised, as many as they found in the coasts, plural, of Israel. I'm emphasizing that because wherever Israel is, or the nation of Israel is, their land is, there's going to be coasts, plural, not one. And they pursued after the sons of pride, and the work prospered in their hand. And they rescued the law out of the hand of the Gentiles and out of the hand of the kings. Neither suffered they the sinner to triumph. They didn't let the king triumph. Now, Mattathias is going to die, unfortunately. So let's learn about his death. And the days of Mattathias drew near that he should die. And he said to his sons, the 5 of them, now have pride and rebuke gotten strength, and a season of overthrow, and wrath of indignation. And now, my children, be you zealous for the law, and give your lives for the covenant of your fathers, and call to remembrance the deeds of our fathers, which they did in their generations, and receive great glory and an everlasting name. And you, my children, be strong. Show yourselves men in behalf of the law, for therein you shall obtain glory. I thought I was reading the movie script from the movie Sparta. Or it's called 300, sorry. It's called 300. You know, look at those words. And you, my children, be strong and show yourselves men on behalf of the law, for therein shall you obtain glory. And behold, Simon, your brother, I know that he is a man of counsel. Give ear to him always. Listen to him. That's what Mattathias is telling them. He shall be a father to you. And Judas, Maccabees, he has been strong and mighty from his youth. He shall be your captain and shall fight the battle of the people. They've been told, listen to Judas as your political leader, your captain, your military leader, and take you to all the doers of the law, and take you to you all the doers of the law. So Judas has been told, get the people who are more about action, who walk the talk, not just talk the talk. And avenge, once you get those people behind you, avenge the wrong of your people. Don't just sit there, do something about it, deal with these Gentiles. Render a recompense to the Gentiles and take heed to the commandments of the law. And he blessed them and was gathered to his fathers. And he died in the 146th year. And his sons buried him in the sepulchres of his fathers at Modin. And all Israel made great lamentation for him. That is my introduction for those 2 chapters. Now we will get into some discussion. Thank you for being a viewer or subscriber. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share if you find this content helpful.